Good afternoon to our audience. Thank you for joining us today for our Q&A webinar with KnowBe4 called Securing the Human Layer. This is always one of the most significant challenges in security, and it's an absolutely critical topic. So we're really excited to bring you some great answers to some great questions today. I would like to introduce Roger Grimes, who is the data-driven defense evangelist for KnowBe4. Roger, thank you for joining us today.
Hello, glad to be here.
And before we get started, I want to make sure I get some housekeeping items out of the way. First of all, this is a Q&A webinar with an emphasis on the Q. So please, if you have questions, please ask them in the questions pane of the GoToWebinar control panel. We will, I promise, if it's a good question, which almost all of them are, take your question live through during today's event. If you have a question about securing the human, I'd say about life in general, but it opens it up too much. But about securing the human, please make sure that you ask it today. We want you to walk away from this event or slide away or however you are attending to have knowledge about this topic and how it impacts your organization. And before we get started again, we also have some handouts. If you look at the handouts pane in the GoToWebinar control panel, there are 2 papers from KnowBe4 that are critical reading. You should download them and read them to discover more about KnowBe4 and about some critical topics in the world of security. And finally, before we get started, we're going to be giving away at the end of the event 3 $100 Tango gift cards, and we'll be reading those. We'll be reading the name of those people at the end of the event. I apologize, I'm getting ahead of myself. And without further ado, let's go to our first question, which is, I think, something that will help us level set the equation and help everybody understand who KnowBe4 is. So Roger, can you give us a brief overview of what KnowBe4 does and why securing the human layer is so important?
So yeah, it's a great question. And just starting with, KnowBe4 is the world's leading security awareness and training vendor. They've been around for about 7 years and just doing great in the industry in the world. But what it does, and the reason why I joined them, I'm relatively new, only joined a year or so ago. I was with Microsoft for 12, 15 years before that, and McAfee before that. But what they do is, essentially try to increase the security culture awareness within an organization. And specifically, they do that really well by doing a combination of simulated phishing campaigns against employees to find out who are the weak links or who can be tricked, followed by lots of training. We are literally like the Netflix of security awareness training. We have thousands of videos, we have games and posters, and some of our security awareness training even is like very Netflixy, meaning that we have these like 12 episode series that have spies and all kinds of intrigue and cool stuff in it. But overall, what we're trying to do is help organizations increase the overall computer security awareness of badness in their environment and helping to regular end users to detect it and put it down. And the reason why it's so important is that survey after survey for at least the last 7 years has shown that phishing and social engineering is responsible for 70 to 90% of all malicious data breaches. 70 to 90%. I think the highest figure I've seen is 91%. But think about that. That means that one thing, we're told to be worried about all kinds of stuff, 16,000. So last year, there was over 16,555 new security vulnerabilities you're supposed to be worried about. Well, unpatched software and the security vulnerabilities, they only make up about 20 to 40% of malicious data breaches. But phishing and social engineering makes up, 70 to 90%. Whatever that percentage is, it changes each year. Whatever it is, it's always been the largest percentage. It used to be unpatched software and unpatched Oracle Java in particular and Adobe Acrobat. Well, it's moved for the last 7 years because everybody's starting to patch better into social engineering and phishing. And so, KnowBe4, I think I joined them because they're kind of uniquely, present to be in the right field to stop most of that. When I was at Microsoft, I was doing all these really cool projects. I was securing Windows Vista, Windows 7, Windows 10, Active Directory. I was doing PKI and smart card projects, and I was doing all this advanced stuff. And I was doing really well. I was being recognized in my industry. I was doing a good job for my customers. But then I realized that those people were getting just as hacked after I left trying to secure them as they were before I was. And no matter what Microsoft put in their operating system, no matter how much more secure they made it, all the people are still getting infected and exploited, and almost always through social engineering. And I started to think, wow, I felt like I was wasting my life. And so I looked for a company that was doing a really good job in security awareness training and trying to stop that #1 main threat. And I ended up with KnowBe4, and I absolutely love it. Love the CEO, Stu, and the whole company. It's one of the funnest places in the world I've ever worked. And people like our software, and you have fun while you're trying to help people.
That's a good thing. I was actually on site at a KnowBe4 client earlier today. It's all over the place. So let's go to our next question. And I want to remind the audience that we really do want your questions. So please ask early and ask often so we can make sure we take your questions throughout the event. So one of the questions that we got from the audience, and this is word for word, is how can I train my users to not click on everything they see? It's a big problem. Roger, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, it's not an intelligence thing, right? I think a lot of us in IT think, I've even heard the term, end loser. We got these people that keep clicking, and and people think it's an intelligence thing, but it's not. We've actually worked with different universities and continuing to work with some universities, working with the University of Central Florida right now, trying to track down the traits that make somebody more or less susceptible to social engineering and phishing. And one of the big early takeaways is it doesn't have anything to do with intelligence. You've got doctors, lawyers, PhDs, you've got Nobel Prize winners, that are susceptible to it, and not dumb people. But what we found out is that it mostly has to do with, are you aware of a particular type of scam? Are you skeptically thinking? So the people that get tricked more often, the people that are a little bit less, I guess for lack of a better word, less criminal themselves, and they don't have that healthy skepticism that they should. Like, they don't know that Microsoft doesn't proactively call you to tell you your computer's infected and offer to help you out. In the real world, us IT people know that not only does Microsoft not proactively call, but if you were to find the right number on the internet somehow, call Microsoft with a credit card and offer them $200, you'd still be having a hard time getting help, right? I mean, that's the reality. Or that the IRS doesn't want you to pay the IRS debt off in gift cards and Bitcoin, and if you don't know about CEO fraud, maybe when the CEO sends you an email going, hey, I need you to get a bunch of gift cards together, or, send this check here. Or if you don't know about mortgage wire transfer fraud, or if you don't know, there's so many things that, if you don't know that, the Craigslist person that's going to buy your product is offering to give you full price plus pay shipping, and all you have to do is use their safe escrow agent. So the idea about security awareness training is exactly that. We're trying to make the culture of the organization more skeptical against social engineering and phishing attacks by making them see and be, understanding the types of things they may see, making them aware of these types of tricks. Because once you become aware that Microsoft doesn't proactively call, you're much more likely to figure out that that's a scam call when it comes to you, or the CEO trying to pressure you with a stressor event to send gift cards to pay for Christmas, or the HR department supposedly asking you for updated W-2 information. If you don't know about these popular scams, you're not aware of them, you're a little bit more likely to be susceptible to them. And one of the things I like to tell people is, don't let the hacker and the phisher be the first time you've tested your employees about whether or not they're aware of a particular type of phishing campaign.
One of the things for the audience, I did put a poll question up that asks you, how worried are you about human security in your organization? I'm going to leave that poll question up while we chat a little bit more. Roger, I think I'm going to go back to one of the points you just mentioned, which was intelligence level. I was spent a lot of years as a CIO, and I got, as a new CIO in one organization, the IT staff was less than kind about how they referred to users. And I heard the term end losers and things like that. And I put a pretty quick stop to it. And the idea that people are stupid or not smart because they don't know something about technology or security is simply not true. It's generally a matter of training, and once they're trained up, they get it. And I think that's critical to your point about people just need to be told, here's what you need to know. And 9.5 times out of 10, they're going to run with it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, let me say, not only that, but I think we're all susceptible to different types of phishing. Like even before I joined KnowBe4, I'm pretty confident over my 30 years I've never been successfully phished. And I knew going to work for KnowBe4, I was like, hey, I know that, you know, they're going to try to phish me and trick me, and they're not going to get me. I lasted 2 days. Stu sent me an email that talked about, hey, we've got new data that shows that that social engineering and phishing and unpatched software aren't the top things. The top reason why people get compromised is misconfiguration. And I knew that was crap because I've looked at all the surveys and data for 30 years. And I clicked on the link. Boom, it was a fake phishing link. And literally, if I would have just slowed down and hovered over the link, it literally said, do not click here. This is a phishing link. You know, like, but you know, Stu knew my motivator. I wrote a book called Data Driven Defense, and he was sending me a survey, you know, showing that the data showed something different. And I'm as, you know, I think as aware of phishing as anyone, and he got me. And so it's anybody, you know, if they hit your stressor event, if they hit the thing, whether it's a child or a loved one, whatever that event is, everybody can be tricked, you know?
Absolutely. And it's just a matter of knowing all the tricks to get around it, right? So
Yep.
One of the questions we just got from the audience, and I'm going to leave that poll up while we answer this, is it possible to get infected or compromised just by opening an email, or do you really have to click on something to be infected?
That's a great question. I would say this, that it is a rarity that simply opening an email can cause an issue. Now, there are instances and scenarios where it can occur. As a matter of fact, right now, KnowBe4's chief hacking officer, Kevin Mitnick, you know, he's one of the world's most famous hackers. He has a particular hacking trick out there where if he sends you a particular email in Microsoft Office 365, that merely previewing this email can send your Windows NTLM password hash to a remote attacker where they can begin to crack it into the plain text password. He has not shared with me the details of how he did it, and I've really tried to find out how he's doing it, and he's not given in yet. He said he doesn't want me, you know, gives it to me, I'm going to get the hole closed real quick. But also Microsoft does have a related patch that's out there that kind of closes a similar type of attack where all you do is open up the email. It's a patch out there. Microsoft's had it out there for 6 months, but it's an optional patch. It's not one that comes down automatically. So to answer your question, over the last 30 years, the number of attacks where you can just simply open up an email and get compromised, very, very, very small. Usually requires that someone have some known vulnerability that they haven't patched. And it's a rarity, and you usually don't have to worry about it. But the one caveat is the Kevin Mitnick. You have to look it up on the internet, and Stu, our CEO, just sent out a link for it. If you send me an email at rogerg@knowbe4.com, I'll make sure I'll send you a link to Kevin's video. But Kevin's got a particular scenario right now that seems to be all you have to do is open the email, even in preview mode, and it sends Kevin your password hash that he can then begin cracking with his 8-core, you know, Unix system. But with that said, let me just say, it's usually very rare and unlikely if you're fully patched and you're doing everything. But you know, about every year or two, there will come out this particular attack where all you have to do is open up and look at an email, and they tend to get patched and closed fairly quickly. And they're not used widespread in the world, even like Kevin's attack right now. And I've done a demo on it. That particular attack that he uses it for penetration testing, where he's getting paid to do some legitimate, you know, hacking for a client that wants him to do it. I've not seen that particular attack used in the wild even once, even though it's potentially possible.
So we have results to our poll question. 12% say they're really not that worried about human security. 66% of you say I have some concerns I need to address, and 22% of you say, yeah, we got to figure this out. So that's interesting results that are about some of your peers in the audience. And let's go to our next question for Roger. So email and fax would seem to be the most common methods for security leaks. Are there other areas that IT professionals should be looking out for?
Yeah, for sure. And let me say that email is really, really popular. It's by far the biggest number one, probably even more than 90%. But we're certainly seeing a lot of attacks that come out of social media sites. both professionally and personally. A lot of people get compromised in their personal account. And if they use the same login name and password, for their social media sites as they do at work, as sometimes happens, that can certainly cause an issue. We're starting to see an increase in incidents of other types of phishing, especially SMS, short messaging service phishing across your phone, those text messages you get. We started to see it kind of eke in a couple of percent last year, and we're definitely seeing an increase in it this year. We're certainly seeing a big increase in the voice messages where the person calls up and claims that they're from Microsoft or from your bank or from PayPal, and there's been a problem. Those have been growing. As a matter of fact, I love this question because a lot of people, I'll hear people go, oh, we got phishing handled or we've got email handled. I laugh first. There is no technical solution. We've been waiting for one for 30 years that would stop all phishing emails and spam emails. Everybody thinks, oh, the next big thing, DKIM or DMARC or whatever the technology is called, oh, it's going to stop phishing, and it's going to be something you don't need to worry about. Well, I've been hearing that for 30 years. It's the perfect technology that is yet to ever stop that stuff coming from an email doesn't exist. But more importantly, if you did it 100% perfect at work and you stopped all phishing emails, well, are you protecting your end user at home, right, on their personal email? Are you protecting them on social media? Are you protecting them on their cell phone when they get SMS messages? Are you protecting them when they get called on the phone? And the answer to that is almost always no. And so that there's a lot of different avenues. All the avenues are starting to be abused more and more and more. Even today, Stu, our CEO, just posted a blog post about how the attackers are increasing what's called wiring fraud or CEO fraud attacks through the SMS messages. That's something we saw a little bit of, and now we're seeing a lot of it.
All right, let's go on to the next question. We got quite a few questions, so I want to make sure we get through them. So this is really two ways to ask the same question. We had two people ask it, and I wanted to ask it in both ways. One is, how can I instill a culture of strict security enforcement without being too intrusive? Or how do you create a security environment that is welcoming but firm to employees? And this is an interesting balancing act that security people really have to be thinking about. What are your thoughts, and what are KnowBe4's thoughts on this question?
So, we look, trying to create a security culture is like kind of getting an infant or a toddler to look both ways before crossing the street, right? You just try to teach it and you make it a normal part of their lives, the education to be aware of looking right and left for cars before you cross the street, so that it becomes a natural part of the behavior. We certainly, our big thing, what we've seen the best success for customers is that they first figure out a baseline of how phishable people are in their environment. So they send out some type of general phish that nobody should fall for, but so it's not very crafty. It looks like a fish. And what they're going to usually find out is somewhere between 25 to 40% of their end user base is susceptible to phishing. And then start giving them education. Give them, every time if someone gets hired, you give them a longer, 30, 45-minute broader video and training that's on, phishing and all the different types. And then, you test them once a quarter, once a month or whatever. You send them a simulated phishing email. And if they fail, you want to give them immediate feedback of, hey, this is a phish test. Here are the things you should have seen that would have told you that it was a phishing test, and then you send them, you can send them training then, or you send little, it could be little videos or little outlines. You literally want to create a culture of security awareness, and you want to make them aware that they're not going to get in trouble if they get phished. Like, hey, I think I got phished. I need to report that to the help desk or incident response team. You need to let them know that we're all in this together, and you're consistent. What you don't want to do, a lot of companies give 5 minutes or 30 minutes of security awareness training once a year. There is not a lot of value in that. You want to provide it more often than that. You want to make it a part of the environment. You want to, try to make it fun. Try to make it a game. Tell people, we believe in more carrot and less stick these days. And so that, when someone, say, oh, if everybody in your department successfully catches the fish and reports the fake phishing or the real fishes or whatever, we'll have a pizza party or something like that. But you want to create an environment where more carrot, less stick, where people are actually encouraged to be better because it's going to result in some sort of reward. And then, trying to make them skeptical, a little bit more skeptical, just like they would, today we're all skeptical when we're, walking across the street or walking in a new foreign city or something like that. You just try to make it natural so they really don't even have to think about it.
Another question from the audience, and the question is, how concerned should we be about mobile mail apps like iOS Mail App? I understand that they're sandboxed, but are they more or less secure than desktop clients?
Mobile apps are probably easier to hack. Well, let me say at least as easy to hack as a desktop. And it depends on, whether you've jailbroken your phone or something. But everything that can happen on a desktop can happen on a mobile client. The only saving grace is that there's less actual data on a mobile phone. But what we are starting to see is a lot more attacks and phishing attacks that come across mobile phones. And there's less information for you to evaluate whether or not that's a phish, because the screen you get and the information that your email client is showing you is far less. And so when we do studies, people that get the same phish on a mobile platform than they did on a desktop platform are far more likely to click on the phish and be fooled by the phish than the desktop client. The desktop clients have lots of real estate where you can see that it has a bogus URL and it'll show the name twice, and you just have better defensive tools. But the saving grace for the mobile environment is that there's just not as much information there. So if they ransomware, lock your phone up, well, it's a bad thing, but they didn't lock up the company.
Next question, what are some of the worst social engineering outcomes you've seen? This was a question right from the audience. Like, tell us the horror story that keeps you awake at night or makes you laugh. I don't know, either way.
Well, I mean, I guess it's, the ones, they're actually pretty common. The worst social engineering outcomes is people that say, hey, we can't train our employees, our boss, or somebody won't let us, send these simulated phishing emails, and because someone got mad or somebody phished the CEO 2 years ago and didn't tell the CEO what was going on, and so they're not allowed to push these training and simulated phishing campaigns to people. And that used to be like the norm. Today it's the rare company that can't send them, but I still see people that can't send them, and they are getting successfully phished. And of course, it's the ransomware stuff, right? I mean, it's where the entire companies, entire hospitals, they get social engineered to running ransomware, and their company is shut down for days to weeks. I was just talking to the FBI yesterday, and they told me they had one FBI client that got ransomware. They got social engineered and running ransomware. It locked up all the company's computers, and they paid $1.6 million to get the ransomware key to unlock the computers. They actually had backups, but they realized by the time they got through doing all the data restores that it was going to cost them more in consulting time and downtime and revenue than to pay the $1.6 million. They paid the $1.6 million, and the ransomware key that they were sent did not unlock their data. So now they're trying to negotiate with a ransomware creator, going, "Hey, your encryption key did not unlock it. Can you help us?" And I don't know. I do not know whether or not they are successful in getting their data unlocked. But they paid $1.6 million, and it didn't unlock their data. That's
unfortunate. There's probably not a money-back guarantee with those things.
Yeah. You hope there's honor among thieves, but I wouldn't. The FBI says you shouldn't pay the ransom. But somewhere on the team, somebody for that company said, no, we got to pay it. We got to pay it. Everybody agreed. And then when it didn't work, that has to be an uncomfortable conversation to take back to the CEO.
I would agree with that. So here's another one. How do I keep people from sharing passwords to secure resources? We see this all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, certainly education is the way that you start. But I tell you something I do a lot is I tell people to take one of those password, programs or queries that will go out on the internet and the dark web and find out how many times their existing login names and passwords have been shared. I think, the free one that a lot of people know is Have I Been Pwned? If you go, haveibeenpwned.com or whatever by Troy Hunt, that was one of the first ones anyone ever heard about. But that's a good one. But at KnowBe4, if you go to knowbe4.com/resources, we have tools that will do it for you, and they're more inclusive. So they will go out again and find either your personal login name and passwords, or they'll do it for your entire organization if that's what you wanted to do. And I think, people are very surprised because on average, I think people have 8 login names and passwords that are compromised out there on the internet. And I even run a password manager now, and it checks all the time to see. I've got hundreds of websites in my password manager, and I'm surprised by how often one of those websites will get compromised, and I'm not reading about it in the media, right? It's just my password management tool is like, hey, that login name and password got compromised. You need to go change it. And then days or weeks later, the news article comes out saying that it was compromised. So I'd say show them how their current stuff could be compromised already, and say you need to stop, using identical passwords between different unknown sites.
We have a question from the audience that's live. So the question is, based on your experience and KnowBe4's experience, which industry or which departments, such as HR, accounting, IT, operations, marketing, etc., within a company has failed most spectacularly? Or which ones are the most common areas of concern, I guess?
Yeah, I would say that, it changes. It changes all the time, over time. I mean, industry-wise, it changes all the time. We certainly see increase, focus on finance and banking and stuff like that because the bad guys are trying to get money. But that always changes, depending. Sometimes it's, it's financial, sometimes it's lawyers, sometimes it's, regular companies. But department-wise, we certainly see some intrigue. Not surprisingly, the C-level people are far more phishable usually than the average employee. And then, things we like to say is things like, let's say IT. IT is not necessarily more phishable than the average employee, but there's a lot more risk, meaning that just because somebody's phishable or the department's more phishable statistically, it may, maybe they're not as risky. Like, who cares if they're phishing, or who cares as much if they're phishing your cafeteria worker, a janitorial worker? What you want to do is be worried about how successful they might be, in your finance department, in your C-level department, in your IT department, and your, all the critical stuff. And like some people worry about, hey, we don't want to have people that are, domain admins or local admins compromised. I try to tell people that, many times those are only your network elevated accounts. You want to be careful to try to protect the risk against people that are like your Salesforce admins, or, your application admins, or people that have access to critical data, because all it does is take one employee to start that program. The next thing you know, you're Sony with your entire email system out there on the internet.
All right, let's go to our next question. So what steps can I take to make sure my users maintain awareness of, really evolving compliance requirements?
Well, certainly I think it all starts with whenever they're hired, they should review and sign, acceptable use policy. It tells them what they can and can't do, or what they should or shouldn't be doing on a computer. But it should also include training to tell them what the compliance is, what they, how big their password, has to be, when they have to change it, what the account lockout policy is, and, so on and so on. So I think, you certainly have to make it when they're hired, and then annually they should review those things. Always make it aware, and available on the internet or on their intranet, so they can review it when they need to. But also you can make it a part of their training. Security, many people, customers we have, like, hey, can we upload our training into your platform? And you can make your own video that has all of your compliance requirements in it, upload it to our platform, and ship it out automatically, just like you would any other video we have, and keep track of how many people viewed it, who still has to view it, and that sort of stuff.
All right. In terms of security threats, do you see any difference between what's happening domestically and what we're seeing happen from outside the country?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, America is number one in hacking. I mean, we do more hacking than anyone. And Americans against Americans is the number one type of crime that you'll get. But certainly we're seeing a huge uptick in foreign adversaries, and even particular countries, like China in particular is always looking for corporate espionage. They're always trying to find out corporate secrets in your intellectual property. Russian and European adversaries tend to be trying to steal money. Russia's a big, Russia, if a Russian hacker breaks in, they almost always don't care about your IP, but they care very much about your money. And so domestically, it can be, there's a lot of domestic hacking. Probably most of it is financially motivated in some way. But we're seeing, certainly a lot of foreign security threats, again, after intellectual property, after your money. And, they steal your identity or whatever to get to your money, to get to those things. Probably the biggest key is that when they come from a foreign place, we can't arrest them, right? They can be a lot more aggressive because there's no warrant, there's no United States warrant that's going to pick up a Russian hacker criminal, and vice versa, to be fair. And so, it's tougher. Like, I've been doing this 30 years, and 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when we found some hacker, foreign or otherwise, in someone's system, we found them, they would run and hide and disappear and get off the system. And these days they just stay. There's no reason for them to run and hide. We're not going to arrest them. They may hide a little bit, but they don't run like they used to. These days they're like, catch me if you can. And a lot of times they're, once they get discovered, they're breaking even more aggressively into the CEO's accounts and more aggressively into IT and the CISO, the CISO's account. I mean, they don't run. They're aggressively fighting and and oftentimes winning against their adversaries, because you can't arrest them. Imagine how good of a hacker you could be if you were actually encouraged to hack every day. It was your job and you could never get arrested. I mean, you'd be a pretty good hacker.
I would agree with that, and it's kind of unfortunate to think about. So here's another question that came just in live from the audience. I understand this is all about training, but how do you make it easy for a non-technical user to understand all of the stuff they need to understand from a security perspective? If it's not simple, you can repeat it all you want, but it won't sink in with what the person says. But how do you make it simple and accessible for the user to understand why this is important and what they need to be doing?
Well, I think that you need to get the right training, and there's training, there's different levels of training from basic to advanced. And the average person in today's society can drive a car, right? And if they can drive a car, they can understand security awareness training, and it's not an intelligence thing, right? It's just making people aware of it, and making people aware of the many types of attacks that have significantly harmed companies, like Sony or Target or whoever it's hit, is to be able to say, hey, there, all it does is take this one slip up, and our company's information can be locked up, and it doesn't hurt to mention, and we can tell who was the first person to get compromised. Attribution. But I would say it is really more about being consistent. If you do it once a year, you're not really going to get a really good uptake. So you have to be consistent and make it part of the culture, and you want to see other people that make it a part of the culture. And by that, I mean, have you ever been walking around in different companies and you can notice that people have walked away from their screens and their computers are left open, they've gone to lunch or they went to the copy machine or whatever. And those people, you're like, oh, okay, they're leaving their computers open. And then I've been to other companies where every time a person walks away from the computer, they're locking the screen. Even if they're going just to the copy machine or the printer, they're locking the screen. And if you're an employee that doesn't get it, but you're in that environment where people are doing things as a regular part of the culture, it can't help but wear off on you. So if you make a security aware culture in your company, even the tough people that are tough to get to, they'll be brought along because they're living in that environment.
Yeah, I used to have people, when we set up group policy, that would lock their screens if they walked away for more than a few minutes, really complain. But these days, I mean, it's either do it yourself or someone's going to do it for you in some ways.
Yeah, and you could do it technology-wise, right? You could have it so they wear some band with an RFID tag, or one of my friends actually injected himself in an RFID transmitter, so whenever he left his laptop, it would automatically lock. I think that's a bit much, but certainly you're just trying to create a culture where most people are doing it automatically. I don't know about you, Scott, but even today, like when I get up from my computer, I lock it and I don't even think about it, right? It's like putting on your seatbelt in a car. Right? How many of us really think that much about the seatbelt in the car? But back in the 60s, they didn't have a lot of seatbelts, and it took years to change that culture.
So this is a sort of a follow-on to the previous question, but humans are creatures of habits and are predictable. How can you train them to be less predictable? I mean, it seems like security in some ways, or insecurity, relies on people being predictable and doing what they expect them to do. How can you make this not happen?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I kind of like the idea of making them be predictable in a habit of doing a good thing. I mean, what's wrong with making a child predictable that they're going to look right and left before they cross the street, or turning on the seatbelt, or clicking in the seatbelt before they drive? I think that the key is that, and I absolutely think you need to make cybersecurity awareness and what you're doing in the world, you need to make it a habit, and you need to make it predictable that they're going to do it, that they're going to, when they walk away from their computer, that they're going to lock their computer. So I think the trick is to give enough constant security awareness where you're developing good habits and good predictable habits. I don't think there's anything wrong. I brush my teeth and I floss every day. Don't even really think about it that much. It's a good habit. And so we want to make good habits. And, we don't want to make them predictable in that, hey, they'll fall for the phishing scam. We want to make it predictable and a habit that they're less likely to fall for a phishing scam.
That's a good point. In fact, this is not necessarily with security, but I think predictability is in a lot of things in life is important. One of the things in where I live, and I'm sure it's this way everywhere, but people simply cannot do four-way stops. And one of the things that happens here is people are trying to be nice and wave people through rather than doing what the predictable thing is. And it's a safety thing. You're not supposed to be nice at a four-way stop. You're supposed to do what people expect you to do.
That's a great point. Great point.
And it seems like that makes more sense than trying to surprise people when they're on the road.
I'm going to steal that. I like that so much. I'm going to steal it for future presentations and claim it's mine. I like that.
Please feel free. So let's go to our next question, which is, how can I help users understand where potential threats originate? How do I help them learn what's coming from inside the company versus from external sources? This is a critical question.
So certainly I think people, at least, educate them on that. You've got threats that are going to be usually external, but we're actually starting to see an increase in threats that appear to be internal, or they appear to be, and they are coming from a longtime trusted company you're working with. So we try to tell people to be suspicious of any type of request, unusual request, for money transfer, for credentials, no matter where it comes from. But I think from, a technical level, I like those systems that kind of tell you, like if you're in Office 365 today and they just did an update and you do an email outside your organization, it puts a little banner across the top going, warning, this is going from outside the company, or this email came from outside the company. And you can do technical things to try to do, use computer security controls that will inspect email that's incoming more than something that's local. But what we're starting to see again is a trend of the threats coming. They could be eventually from an external site, but they're actually, the hackers taking over a coworker's computer, or the CEO secretary's computer, or the an IT security person's computer, or your mortgage escrow loan officer's computer. And so you're actually getting threats from internal, or what look like internal trustworthy sources that are a bit unusual. But because you see them and you're like, oh, that's from somebody I know, and it really is coming from the real email address, you kind of trust it from the start. What we're saying is, regardless of its origin, if it looks suspicious, or it looks like it's a change, an unusual request for money or gift cards, or they're giving me a new bank account to wire information to, or hey, my help desk or my HR team is asking me for my W-2 information again. What we're trying to tell people is to be aware of these types of scams, and hey, pick up the phone. One of the best things you can do when you have something unusual is to pick up the phone. But you want to use security awareness training to let people know that there's threats from outside the company, from inside the company, and also from trusted vendors, right? A lot of people, if they got an email from a trusted vendor, even saying something kind of weird, they might tend to trust it more than otherwise. What we're saying is, regardless of where that email came from, if it's asking for unusual information, you need to be skeptical.
I had this happen this morning, believe it or not. We got a note from a vendor. I went to my spam folder, which was a clue, that basically said, here's our new bank account information. Please update your records. And forward on to somebody said, please call them and make sure that this is real. Because obviously we want to, not be defrauded. But yeah, I mean, picking up the phone and that's too little of that happens sometimes these days.
Yeah, to add to that, I just bought a house, where KnowBe4 is in Clearwater, Florida. And I knew, when I was closing on the mortgage, I had to send, whatever the 10% down, payment is for the loan to an escrow agent. And I got an email from the escrow agent going, hey, we need your 10% down payment, and you need to send it now, or else it won't, or else you can't close your loan on Monday. And here's the banking information. And I picked up the phone and called them, and I did the wrong thing. I called the number that was in the email, and I thought it was funny. It said, this email is not a scam, but click here to learn about mortgage fraud scams. And I was like, well, I called their number in the email, and the person picked up and said, oh, can I talk to my loan officer to make sure that I've got the right information here? And they went, oh, she's in a meeting. And I thought, well, that's convenient. And I said, okay. I said to the woman on the phone, what is the name of the convenience store that's next to your other mortgage loan office? And she's like, what? You mean the 7-Eleven? I went, yep, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't somebody in Nigeria, and hopefully she would respond fast enough that it wasn't the Nigerian accent that was using Google Maps. But what a lot of people don't know is that these hackers break into these mortgage loan officers. They go through all the person's emails about what loans are getting ready to close, and then they send a fake fraud on the day that you're expecting it. They send it from your loan officer or your escrow agent officer to you, and all they've changed in that email is the bank wiring information. And then they create a mail rule that deletes the real email that the agent then sends later on in the day, and nobody that's involved knows that's occurred until they finally go to close on the loan, and the person's like, you haven't paid the money. And then very few people have double the money to pay for their new house, and so they lose their money, they lose their house, and even the agents and everybody's out of the commission. It's pretty wild deal.
Our next question is, should behavior changes be taught, enforced, or both?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, yeah, it's both. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly both. I mean, we always say that it should be a combination of technical controls to the best of your ability. You need to have policy that people are aware of. So administrative policies that people know, hey, I shouldn't do this and I shouldn't do that. Or if I get a request for money that's above, $1,000 on an unusual day, the policy says I have to call on the phone. And even the person that, maybe there's someone legitimately requesting the money, they need to know that that person needs to call them. So you need to have policies enforced. You need to have technical controls. And those are the VPN, firewall, antivirus gateways that are trying to stop badness from getting into your environment. But you also need to do security awareness, because none of your technical controls are ever going to be perfect. And so it needs to be a combination of both. And again, it needs to be, and if someone violates something, it used to be in old days, we'd say, hey, you need to fire them or get them in trouble. These days, we're all about using positive reinforcement, because the data shows that if you use more carrot and less stick, these people that click on everything are more likely to be converted.
So I have a poll question up that basically asks, have you ever fallen victim to a phishing scam, even a little one? Be honest. I promise that it'll stay between the 143 of us. So never you have, or I begrudgingly admit that yes, I have fallen victim to something. So while we have that up, Roger, one of the questions is, we got from the audience, where is it? Sorry, I just lost it while I was putting the poll question up. We'll go to the next question in the deck. And again, if you have questions, please make sure you ask them in GoToWebinar. We will be, time permitting, we'll be asking you a question during the event. So to follow on to the next question, I think this is a really important one, is should lack of security awareness be cause for termination? And at what point should we consider such an action?
Well, I don't think lack of security awareness. I mean, usually lack of security awareness means that, you haven't been trained appropriately. But let's say that you've trained them appropriately and they're still clicking on everything. The famous story I like to tell is, I'm older, I'm 52, but back in the days of the I love you worm, this email attachment. It said, I love you. And if you clicked on it, it would infect your whole network and bring down email and all this stuff. Well, I had a CPA partner in the CPA firm where I was. He actually clicked on it 3 times in 3 days, infecting the whole network. And I went to him and said, hey, does this not look familiar, this thing you shouldn't be clicking on, the I love you? And he's like, no. And he was one of the smartest guys in the world. I literally was like, no one loves you. Stop clicking on this email. But you always have those people that click on everything So I think better for the question is you give them an appropriate security awareness training or what you think is appropriate, but they don't seem to be converting. Well, the first thing is to understand that, ask them, hey, how can I help you? Because some people like to hear it. Some people like to see it. Some people like to, I had one user that was she was clicking on everything and I couldn't get her to stop, and I actually brought her into the HR sessions for new employees and asked her to share her experiences about her being phished and what they look like. And because she was part of the teaching experience, she actually got a lot better at stopping. She stopped clicking on stuff, right? So everybody has different learning styles. Use the data. Look at who is falling susceptible to what types of phishing scams. If you're, doing enough of it and getting enough of the data feedback, and try different things. And again, more carrot, less stick. It's all right to put in policy that someone, hey, if you violate it for the 19th time, we're going to fire you or something like that. I don't know if somebody should be absolutely terminated because they clicked on a phish. I would say I'd much rather you tell someone, if you think you clicked on a phish, we want you to report it. And you can even make it like a game to them. Use the phish, like we got the phish alert button where if you think it's a phish, you report it. And a lot of people will, once they start playing that, they kind of think it's like a game. I know IT's trying to trick me. I'm going to catch it. And then, again, offer them a pizza party or something positive if they or the group around them is able to do it successfully. And I just guess in my life, I've not seen anyone that was fired because they kept clicking on phishing. But of course, if you click on something that's ransomware that takes over the whole company, you have to pay $1.6 million. Well, you might be fired.
All bets are off at that point, huh?
Yeah, and it's good to share stories, right? Because a story is worth 1,000 words.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the result of our poll question, have you ever fallen victim to a phishing scam? 69% of you say never. And
Aha! That link that you clicked that said never, that was a phishing link.
It was. No. And 31% say they begrudgingly admit that, yes, they have fallen victim to some level of a phishing attack. Hopefully not a $1.6 million one, but that's actually surprising to me and really great. If almost 70% of our audience doesn't think they've been tricked, I got to tell you, that's higher than I thought, and that's pretty good. I mean, kudos to y'all. I mean, that's a lot higher than I thought it was going to be, and way to go. It might just be that this is something the audience is attuned to, and maybe that's why, or possibly some were honest. But only one. I'm not going to say which one. I'm kidding, of course. Okay, so one of the audience members has just responded with the comment is, good practice would be to set up an abuse mailbox for reporting suspicious emails or other actions. That's what they've done. What are your thoughts on that, Roger?
That's fantastic. So again, we have our you can download the free phish alert button and tie that to an email that ties to an inbox. But that's fantastic because not only do you want to kind of gamify it and make employees think, hey, we're trying to spot the fake simulated phishes and the real phishes, but it's very important that your people that are in charge of responding to those types of events can see trends and patterns. And by that, I mean, I was at one major Fortune 10 company a couple of weeks ago, and there was a sudden Russian campaign, spear phishing campaign to phish their employees. And they had that sort of reporting mechanism. And the incident response people were able to see that 90 different people reported this sudden influx of this Russian spam, Russian spear phishing attack. And when they did the incident response, they found out that 134 of their employees had successfully responded with their credentials to that Russian mail, that Russian phishing attack. So by having people that didn't fall for it report it, and your IT staff can go, hey, I'm starting to see this pattern here. Now we're going to run a query and see how many people got this email. And I think in that particular case, they actually had black holed the all Russian IP addresses, so the email actually never got sent back. But I remember the CISO, he was screaming. He's like, I can't believe it. We've done the training. They were using a competitor's product, a good product, but it just didn't work for them in this case. And he was furious. He's like, I can't believe we have 134 people that fell for the scam, and they blocked it because they had another technical control. But it's good to be aware that even happened, because that way you can say, hey, there's a gap, there's something that's broken in our technical controls and or our training to let this get through. And why did 134 people that were trained to expect this sort of thing, why did they fall for it, right? Sometimes success and failure gives you data points.
Absolutely. We do have follow-up to the poll question. Someone said, I said never, but that might very well be yes, but I never found out if it was. So there's probably some of that in there as well.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So we'll do our next question. And this goes down to sort of a regulatory compliance, or, there's every threshold of different organizations, different industries. So I work with doctors, and there are a lot of regulations in this arena. Can companies like KnowBe4 help me with specific healthcare and security needs? And this can really go across other industries as well.
Yeah, certainly. Again, we have over 1,000 pieces of content, and we have content for every type of compliance regulation you could think of. We have a lot of HIPAA stuff, HIPAA only stuff, and it's not just phishing stuff. Like for the HIPAA stuff, we have videos that talk about physical training, right, or physical controls, or where a person doesn't let another person piggyback to get inside of a hospital, or how to stop babies from being kidnapped, or whatever it might be. But we have very industry and vertical market specific training for many different companies and organizations and compliance needs. We certainly don't have them all. I think I read in a magazine article, Forbes or something, yesterday. There's over 200 different compliance things that may hit a company in cybersecurity frameworks. But I don't think we cover all of them, but we certainly cover a lot of the main ones, and we certainly cover HIPAA. But I'd go even beyond that. Is not only do you want to have HIPAA specific training and compliance, but you need to interlace that with more general stuff. And what I mean by that is, you want to send emails that might be sent that are kind of healthcare specific, but you have to intermix that with very general types of fishes. Like the number one fish that people fall susceptible to is the free Dunkin' Donut fish, or the free Amazon gift card. But you want to intermix something that's specific for your organization and industry and compliance, but you want to mix it in with something that's more general, because in real life, they're going to get a mix of both. And so you need to train your end users with both types of training.
Good point. Excellent points. So I don't know if it's more difficult or easier at scale, but how can human security be monitored at scale, and how can CIOs and CISOs get proper alerts as to what's working and what's not working in terms of human security?
Yeah, well, certainly with our product, and there's a reason why it's #1 security awareness platform around the world, is that there's lots of data. It will show you every success or failure at an individual level, department level, location level, and the global level within your organization. So automatically you can click and within 1 second get a good idea of how security awareness training is doing, who took the security awareness training, who still needs to take it, who partially took it, who needs to, who got successfully phished, what was the type of phish that got to them, did they click, did they provide credentials, did they, you can even drop USB keys in your parking lot, and that will be reflected in the statistics. And did they open up the document? Did they just plug it into a USB drive, or did they open up the document? If they opened up the document and they got prompted for credentials, when they went to the website, did they put in their credentials and that sort of stuff? And you get the data, and it's crucial because different people and departments have different success rates. So you have to have that data. And one of the things I'm particularly proud of at KnowBe4 is we have what's called a virtual risk officer. It actually assigns a risk score made of many different things. It's how risky the person or position is their login name and passwords actually out there on the internet currently today, or have they been there in the past? How are they doing on their training? How have they done on their simulated phishing exercises? And you can literally get a risk score and see it going, up or down. Hopefully it's going down over time for the person or device, and for the department or the organization or globally. And I got to tell you, there's nothing like your CEO and CISO, when they see this thing, it's phenomenal, because they get a number, 6, 7, 8, whatever it happens to be, and they can get a graph and see that number for their organization or particular departments going up or down over time, and hopefully going down over time. So I love that. That's one of the things I love about our industry is I don't think there is anywhere, any other type of control that you can implement and see such a drastic drop in cybersecurity risk. Because remember, phishing and social engineering, 70 to 90% of all successful data breaches, malicious data breaches. And if you do security awareness training, you can get your what's called phish-prone users, or your rabid clickers, or whatever they happen to be. You can get them from being 25 to 40% to 1 to 2% in a year. But you don't have to believe me. You can actually look at your own data and see it. I mean, that's the best part, is you can look at how it's working and what's not working, and where you have to concentrate a little bit more on, and who you can slack up on.
We have another question that came from the audience, and is it possible to get a virus from downloading a PDF like in the movie Black Hat?
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a possibility. In most cases, if you disable the links, by default, Adobe Acrobat and, Phantom PDFs and stuff like that, they disable the contents by default. And if you click on them, they warn you that you're going to be able to, that you might be downloading content. But there are cases. There was just one a couple of months, just like a month or two ago, before the patch was released, where they crafted a special type of UNC link, NetBIOS UNC link, a little bit similar to what Kevin Mitnick is doing. They put it in a PDF, and it bypassed all the Adobe Acrobat warnings about the link, and automatically would launch this other program. But, Adobe found out about it, and they closed it, in a couple of days or a month or whatever it is. So is it possible for that to happen? Yes. Usually, though, it's in an unpatched scenario where someone hasn't patched something, and they do come along. But most of the time you're going to get a prompt, if you're not, a warning, hey, be careful about this. And in most cases, you're going to get multiple warnings. I'm always amazed in the human condition that, like one time I was looking into this attack that took down RSA and Lockheed Martin a couple of years ago. In order for them to be successfully phished, they had to ignore 5 different "are you sure" warnings. Are you sure this could contain malware? Are you sure you want to do? And the 2 employees that fell for it, said, yes, we do want to download this code. We do want to bypass the security warning 5 different times to get infected. So being warned about it does not necessarily mean you don't get infected. But what I will say is that, again, those are more edge cases where it kind of happens. That what's called silent drive-by downloads, where you just open up something and you get exploited. Those are a lot rarer today. They do happen. They do exist. They tend to be closed, but they do come up every now and then. But it's certainly not the majority of your risk.
And we have our final question for the event today. Where can I learn more about KnowBe4?
Well, certainly go to KnowBe4.com, KnowBe4.com. And although I like to say, if you put a /resources on that, that'll take you to a really cool web page that has all of our white papers and tools. And there's all kinds of tools. You can phish yourself. You can phish your organization. You can find out how secure your email server is. You can find out if your login name and passwords are out on the internet, or how many login name and passwords of your current users are out there on the internet. So a lot of really cool stuff out there. Some of my white papers, and we put new tools and white papers up there every month. Go there. I think you'll see 1 or 2 things that you'll absolutely love and use forevermore.
Excellent. Roger, thank you so much for this great insight into securing the human layer. It's a critical topic, and I'm sure our audience appreciates your thoughts.
Thank you.
And we have 3 $100 Tango gift cards that we're going to be giving away to one of our attendees, or to 3 of our attendees, I should say. The first one is Allison Carrillo, I believe. The next one is Pinko Bagat. And the third one is Zachary Kramer. The 3 of you will be getting an email from Melina on our team here at Actual Tech Media. Thank you to our audience for joining us for today's event, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.